with a certain sickness going around which no one on the side is allowed to speak the name of without being struck by the demonetization hammer, my group and I have been able to play substantially more D&D than what was available to us prior, with school and all occupying much less of our time. So, you might ask, what makes D&D so great? Well, firstly, for those of you who do not know what D&D is, its full name is Dungeons and Dragons. Yet if I were to say that name every time instead of D&D, I am sure both you and my throat will dislike the outcome. If that name still doesn't ring a bell, D&D is a so-called tabletop role-playing game, or TTRPG for short. It is actually one of the oldest, if not the oldest, in a matter of fact. So it has quite a ton of lore and content to its worlds and its systems. In this game, you have a so-called dungeon master, whom I will refer to as DM, and the players. The main difference is that the players have so-called player characters, or PCs, as I will refer to them from now on. These PCs embark on epic journeys, so-called adventures, slaying legendary foes, exploring ancient temples and dungeons, and maybe even solving an intricate political plot. The content of these adventures are up to the DM and the players, as one table might have a particular interest in playing as a group of stealthy vagabonds, sneaking through the dark alleys of a bustling city and exploring their adventures of this vagabond group, while another table might decide that they want to open their own order of paladins, being an epic and grand beacon of hope and prosperity to all lands. These adventures can be stitched together so that a greater narrative in the form of a so-called campaign appears, with the story taking on a greater scope, so to speak. You can imagine these adventures like arcs in a movie or a book or a play, but some DMs might choose to run their campaigns with each sessions and adventures being like episodes in a television show. Normally, what each of the players and the DM is interested in is discussed before playing the first session of the campaign in a so-called Session 0. In this Session 0 is also where the PCs are made. Of course, some players may need more than one session to come up with a full concept of their character, so it is totally fine and acceptable to leave the session with maybe just a rough concept of your character, or maybe even just the core idea behind him or her, and then develop that character over the course of the campaign. Most actions of the PCs will be handled by the DM. The only actions laying outside of this are the so-called role-playing, where a character might decide to speak to different PC of the party, and that is not in the realm of the DM's actions. In order to explain how the game itself is actually played, we will assume that a player decided to create Wirren Elassidir, a wood elf ranger who fled from his home at an early age and has since been raised by a family of dwarves. Now, in the first session, the party is tasked to go out into the forest and investigate a chariot crash. After arriving where the crash occurred, Wirren's player might decide to investigate the axles of the wagon to see if they are broken or not, and if that was the cause of the crash. As D&D is not just make-believe, the DM might ask for an investigation roll. The DM can decide what role to ask for depending on the choice of words of Wirren's player. If the player were to say, ask if his character could make out any carpentry flaws in the axes if they are actually broken, the DM could instead ask for a carpentry's tool ability check. An ability check roll is the roll of a d20, a 20-sided die, the result of which is modified by a score. So, if we were to say that the result of the die roll was a 14, and that Wirren has a +3 modifier in investigation, the total result would be a 17. The dice rolling system and the game mechanics is by no means complicated, yet this will not be the focus of this video, as this was just a brief explanation of the game. So, to finally answer the question in the title, why should you play D&D? Well, it is rather simple. D&D is something for everyone, not just sweaty nerds in the basements of their mother, as was previously during the 90s and 80s depicted by media. No, it is something for everyone, especially in times like these, where nerd culture, in quotation marks here, is incredibly popular and where video games are enjoyed by the masses. Whether you are a 70-year-old grandmother or a 6-year-old, D&D can be just the game for you. This is because it is so universal and simple to get into, yet in contrast so amazingly rich in depth that there are almost infinite hours of playtime and joy to be had in this game, with next to nothing in forms of repetition appearing. It is also quite the social game, as you meet with your friends or whoever you may play the game with and adventure together as a group. Now, a little warning. While this is only a warning for some, it does have to be mentioned that D&D sessions can take up quite a chunk of time. The average for my group, for example, is 3.5 to 4 hours. However, luckily, the time flies while playing. I have found D&D to be a game in which I can connect with my friends, tell a epic story, and in which we can all find unique and memorable moments which we all hold dear, and some even reference now, months later after they occurred. It also provides me with time outside of school where we all come together and play this game of ours. The possibilities inside the game itself are also endless, as there is no real fixed story, as yes, the DM is responsible for running the game and coming up with a story. However, the DM is not writing a book, no. He is instead coming up with the framework of a story for his players to explore. Because inside this framework is where then the players take their actions and fill the interior of the framework. There also is no fixed setting in which campaigns must take place, as there are countless pre-written ones for the DM to choose from, or the DM could come up with a realm of their own creation, giving them full control over every little aspect of the world. To give an example, the first game I ever ran was a pre-written module made by Wizards of the Coast themselves, called The Lost Mine of Phandelver. Yet quickly, I found myself improvising most of the sessions, as my players had an iron will to refuse any bits of story and plot hooks I offered them. So instead of following the actual storyline, they kidnapped a bunch of goblins in the first, fought and killed a night hag in the second, and were victorious against a demonic cult in the last session. We then proceeded to play our first actual campaign, which took place in a world of my own, on the planet of Galadriel in the region of Alexandrium. In this campaign, players started off in a small trading town on the coast, defeating an eldritch abomination, and then almost 10 levels later, at the end of their journey, defeated an invading demon prince, trapping his soul in the cave systems for all eternities, with the city which they once sought to destroy being devoid of any life, as a different evil creature had betrayed the party and wiped out every individual inside the city, adding them to his undead army. With my current campaign, we have decided that instead of fantasy, we much more want to play in a gritty, dark cyberpunk world. In order to achieve this, I simply advanced the timeline on Galadriel by 2,000 years. This campaign has started on a moon of Galadriel, in one of the lower levels of a mega city, the party being forced to flee after having killed 3 inquisitors of a criminal network. They are currently in a orbital station above a different moon of Galadriel, waiting for permission to fly down to a city where the next adventure will be held. What I'm trying to say with this recollection of memories is, as long as your DM is ready to put in some work into the world and into the story itself, pretty much everything can be achieved and played. The only limitation here, of course, being imagination. There are a great many sources of informations and guidelines on how to DM and on how to play, so if I have managed to pique your interest in the magical world of D&D with this video, be sure to check those other sources out, as they can be of great assistance to ease your entry into D&D. If this video has been some entertainment and been of interest to you, be sure to leave a comment or like, as I would greatly appreciate that. If you do have any questions, be it to D&D or to the future of the channel, you can of course ask those in the comments below. I will read each and every one of them and be sure to answer them all. Thank you for watching.